Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Usagi Podjimbo podcast. I'm your host, Mike, as always. With me is the little Ronin rabbit himself, Usagi Yojimbo. Hey, how's it going? No, I'm just joking. Usagi is not here. He's here in spirit and here in the comic book with us. But if this is your first time listening, thanks for listening. If you're a returning listener, thanks for still listening. We're going through the Usagi Yojimbo comic book series for the first time, and I just wanted to share my thoughts with you as we're going through each and every story we can get our hands on. We are halfway through with the original Usagi run, then we're going to be going into the Usagi Yojimbo saga, which is really exciting to say the least. But today we are looking at the duel. But before we get into the duel, if you like the podcast, I can't talk. If you like the podcast, make sure to share the podcast with anybody else who loves Usagi just as much as I do, just as much as you do. It really helps the podcast. Go check out. We're on Threads, and we're on Facebook with the Usagi Podjimbo podcast. Go there. We have a Facebook group, 35 members strong. Shout out to my members of the Facebook group. Y'all are awesome. Just saying. But let's get into this episode. This issue is a little. I want to say a little different, but it's something to say the least. It made me have a lot of different feelings when reading this particular issue. But let's get into it, and we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about this issue. So this issue starts out with, obviously, a duel, and these two men talking about this duel. They're like, even money? No even money. 2-1 odds. That's what we get. This guy fighting, he's like a bear with he's a grizzly looking bear, I want to say. He looks a little like he's very like unkept, I want to say. He is the local champion of his town, and as this portly fellow is, I don't even remember if we get a name for this guy, but we'll call him the gambler, the portly gambler. He is taking bets on this particular duel, and we see, okay, I'll give you three to 2 odds. You're like, okay, I'll take that bet. I got a few coins in this and whatnot. And we see this other. I want to say he's a fox. This fox guy, and he's very much watching and looking at this duel, and we see the local champion ends up actually fighting no other than our little Ronin rabbit Usagi, and they get into the duel, and it looks like Usagi who struck first, or maybe the champion struck first. There's a big argument about what exactly did happen, but Usagi insists that he actually struck first, which leads to another duel, but this time with swords, unfortunately. And unlucky for the local champion, he ends up losing this particular duel. Usagi says he should have never agreed to this because nobody should have actually died in this situation. And we happen to see Usagi talking to the Fox Man, the mysterious Fox Man. He tells him this was a fair duel, summon the authorities. Meanwhile, nobody touches a body, and Usagi says this was such a waste. And the mysterious Fox Man says, it was unavoidable. He was too skilled an adversary to take lightly. And then he ends up going over and talking to Usagi. He's like, you have an unusual technique. I witnessed a similar form only once before, a month ago or so. And they happen to start talking about, Usagi happens to start talking about his teacher, Katsune, not Katsune, Katsuichi. I get that name always mixed up with Kitsune. Katsuichi. I was reading Ninja Turtles earlier, and they had Kitsune in there, which is a character. But Katsuichi, he taught him like this particular new style before his death, and they happen to sort of bond when talking about their samurai stuff that they've done and whatnot. We find out that this fox, his name is Shubo, and Shubo is an unemployed samurai. And we start to talk and start to walk down the street and whatnot. And we happen to see one of the guys who was betting on the duel. Tells him, "Oh, you're such a skilled samurai, rabbit. You made me a bundle of money and come stay in my inn." And that Shubo and Usagi kind of part ways, and we see. Well, not really at this point. They don't part ways. They part ways later. I'm sorry. They part ways later, and they happen to be talking and sharing some dinner. And Shubo says, "Are you just passing through Usagi?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm just passing through. I'm actually going back to my home village because he's been wandering around for such a long time throughout his journeys, which we will actually get to later in an issue coming up soon. We'll get to see Usagi actually go back to his hometown, which is pretty cool. Um, Usagi starts talking about how it's time to settle down and stuff like that. And Shubo says, "Oh, I feel the same way. I do want to settle down with my wife and my son. It's going to take a lot of money to end up actually settling down." And Usagi's like, "No, it's not really going to take a lot of money. You just got to work. Basically what Usagi says." And Shubo says, "A man should be able to provide for his family." As he says, home, clothes, the nicest thing in life, such like that. I'm not a monk, living in squalor, basically, is what he kind of says. As Usagi and Shubo part ways after this meal, after this discussion about finally settling down, we see Shubo walking into what I'm guessing is it's a house, I'm guessing, or like I don't want to say like a hotel, but like a place to stay for the night. He's like, "I'm back." And he's like, "Well, how did it go?" And Shubo says, "Perfect." And apparently Shubo is talking to the portly gambler who we saw before, who doesn't get a name. But Shubo says to the gambler, "Usagi is very skilled, but I think I can beat him. I'm staking my life on it, aren't I?" And the big guy says, with this victory today, the townsfolk will surely bet heavily on him, and we will get rich. And Shubo's like, "Yeah, then I'll finally have enough to settle down." Shubo says. And the gambler says, "Don't say that. We've got quite a racket going on, here, coming to town and setting up a match, and doing the locals a favor and stuff like that. We're making buku amounts of money doing this." And Shubo says, "I told you, this is the last duel I'm going to have. I'm going to settle down." And the gambler is really having none of this. He wants to keep this racket going on, to say the least. Shubo ends up going upstairs, and we shockingly see that Shubo's wife and his child are actually here with Shubo, which is very surprising. I thought maybe he left them like back at home where he was from, and but no, they travel along with him apparently. And his wife's name is Cunio. Cunio. I don't know how to pronounce that exactly. I butcher all these words. We're just going to call her Shubo's wife, to be honest. Uh, uh, but Shubo comes in. He's like, "Oh, I found my next opponent." And his wife is very much like, "Oh, you don't have to do this. We can go leave right now, and everything will be okay." And Shubo is very much not having it whatsoever. He wants the best for his wife and child, and he is like, I've done this a dozen times. It won't matter. I can actually take him. I am that skilled enough warrior where I can actually go and take on Usagi. But his wife does not think he can actually take on Usagi, and his wife doesn't want him to die, obviously. But Shubo asks his wife, "Do you think I'm a fool? No one wages against a duel with sticks. We have to fight with swords. So that's what they're talking about. There's this one little touch that I actually like. So Shubo's wife is holding the baby, and the baby's sleeping through all this big commotion that's going on with argument with Shubo and his wife. You see like these little Z's in the little each panel, but the baby actually ends up waking up, which is not good, you know. So Shubo and his wife end up making up, and he tells her to basically tomorrow go wait outside town. I'll show up and we'll go and we'll live happily ever after, is what Shubo says to his wife, which is really weird because in the panel prior, he ends up putting his hands on his wife. So I don't really know exactly how this relationship is working out for them. But I mean, back in the day, I guess there was more of like the men ruled everything and the women were very subservient. Um, yeah, I really don't like that look for Shubo. I kind of like Shubo a little bit, but I did not like that personally about him in this aspect. But we won't be seeing Shubo anytime soon later on. We'll just say that much. Spoilers. But in the next morning, we see Usagi walking along, thanking the innkeeper for his hospitality, and everybody's acting weird around Usagi. They're like, "Oh, hey, samurai, hey, I got a lot of money riding on you. Oh, hey, what's going on, samurai? You gonna win that duel today?" And Usagi's like, "Man, there's a lot of odd people around here. Like, what's going on?" And we see Shubo and a crowd of people waiting for Usagi, and Usagi's like, "What's going on?" And the big guy is like, "Hey, we got a duel to fight. Go fight your duel, Ronin." And we see Shubo and Usagi, and and Shubo says, "Yeah, we have a duel we agreed upon." And Usagi's like, "We agreed. I agreed at least to fight with sticks, not with swords." And and Shubo's like, "No, it has to be to the death, or nobody's basically gonna pay." You know, and Usagi says, "I won't kill you for no reason whatsoever." And Usagi ends up finding out that Shubo and the gambler are actually working together and basically doing this big old racket to make money and whatnot. So Usagi basically has his reasons because Shubo is not dignified or doesn't have the dignity of a samurai because he is lying and cheating. I guess kind of lying basically, and not like upfront and telling the truth or whatever. And Shubo says, justifies this, saying, "I needed the money, Usagi. Whether it comes from a lord or a gambler's, money is money," he says. Like, okay, we're getting ready to fight. And we see Usagi and Shubo whip out their swords. Meanwhile, elsewhere, outside the city, we see Shubo's wife. She's talking about how, "Oh, your daddy should be along any minute. It's going to be okay. We can leave this dreadful place and move on with our lives." And it's a really cute, nice little scene with Shubo and Shubo's wife and the baby. Like, it's cute, where the baby's like trying to catch like a butterfly, but it's not really working out so well, for the baby, and I guess luckily for the butterfly, so the butterfly doesn't die. You know, but we see Usagi and Shubo, which I gotta say, this scene right here, we have Shubo and Usagi standing out on the like against each other, is actually what they used in the collector's editions for the books, for the front covers of the books, which is really interesting. Because I was like, who is this other guy, and why is he on the front cover of my book? And I was like, oh wait, it's Shubo, you know. But I love this scene where like you got the guys sweating, like, oh, who's gonna win? Who's gonna win the duel? Whatnot. And so Usagi and Shubo fight each other. Usagi looks like he's going to be going down for the fight, but luckily, and Shubo ends up turning around. He's going to strike Usagi, and he falls down dead. And we see a little skull with in a thought bubble pop up. Excuse me, I had to get a drink of water there. But yeah, Shubo ends up dying, unfortunately. Everybody is happy and elated because they're all getting a big payday, apparently, because they all bet on Usagi. And Usagi says, how dare you? He gets all mad and whatnot. He's like, oh, how dare you do this? This person lies dead and you celebrate it. And he's like, I hope I never return to this this lonesome town or loathsome town, he says, and he walks off, and they're all the people are also sad and whatnot, and and we get see these guys, and they're like, I think these are guys who the gambler owes money to. I wasn't really for sure exactly who they were, but they're kind of mocking and talking about what happened with Usagi and Shubo and whatnot, and they're like, "Oh yeah, did you see how mad he was? Yeah, his eyes all bugged out and whatnot. He was going to attack us. I thought, and like, yeah, but we got all rich and whatnot. But they're like, hey, where's the bet maker? And we see this guy come, this big burly bear guy. He comes in. He's like, I found him. He was trying to run off, and it just so happens that the gambler ended up placing too many bets. It seemed like is what I got about this, because he swindled and he swindled these people out of their money and whatnot, and he was trying to run off. And we get this scene where Usagi, you hear the gambler, he's like, stay back, stay back. These guys are going to kill him, whatnot. And we see Usagi's like, I thought I heard somebody scream. It must have been my imagination. And then the book ends in a very, very somber way, I have to say. We see Shubo's wife, and she's playing with her son, and they're still waiting out there for Shubo to return. She's getting worried as she sees, and she ends it's starting to get later and later, and we ends up seeing her. It's nighttime. She's laying on the ground sobbing, and the baby is whining, and that is how this issue ends. And I just have to say, this is a very interesting issue, because I feel like it really plays into the fact or in the world of Usagi, because the world isn't as black and white, good and evil as one would make it out to be. There's very much a shades of gray, and like Shubo wasn't a bad guy. He just he wanted to do what was best for his child and his wife and whatnot, and it would kind of ended up being some underhanded tactics, but he wasn't a bad guy. And seeing him and Usagi talk and bond and whatnot was really cool. But man, the outcome, there was no good outcome in this. Just like in the fire and ice, or the ice and fire issue with the sword that Usagi had to go get from the dead samurais. What was it, the dead samurai's mistress or whatever it was? I can't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, it was so. This was so. This issue kind of tore me up a little bit, because I felt bad for Shubo's wife and his child, and Shubo as well, because it was that one guy who's way almost ready to retire. You got that old grizzled cop who's ready to retire. He's got one more mission in him, one more thing, and then something bad happens and he dies. That's basically how I feel this issue was. And I was like, oh man, this is gonna end terribly. And it did. It ended terribly for everybody. Even the gambler got the shit kicked out of him, but yeah, this was a really interesting story Stan Sakai weaved, to say the least. Very, very interesting. Um, it was interesting that we didn't get a lot of Usagi in this issue. It was very, very heavily focused on Shubo. I thought Shubo was going to be a new recurring character, but now Shubo is not a recurring character at all. I thought it would be kind of an interesting flip of the coin and be a Usagi opposite type of thing, to where we have Usagi who's a good guy, and then we have Shubo who would be in the morally gray area, not always a good guy type of thing, the complete opposite of Usagi. We would happen to probably see him one day, see him again. I guess kind of like a Gin almost, but I guess Gin kind of takes that spot with Usagi, to say the least, which we haven't seen Gin in quite some time. Starting to get worried about my boy Gin, but yeah. interesting issue. Um, it it blew away my expectations because I didn't know it was going to happen, and I was like, "Whew, man, I didn't see that coming." I did not see that coming. But guys, thanks for listening. If you want to leave feedback, you can leave feedback on Spotify or like Apple Podcasts or what like that. I'll get to it. I'll read it. I'll even read about it and talk about it on the podcast. If you leave me comments or whatever, you can do as well on the Facebook page, Usagi Podjimbo on Facebook. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed this issue. Stay safe. Go read some Usagi Yojimbo. It'll make your life better. I think Usagi Yojimbo makes the world better in all sense purpose, you know. But anyways, thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Not video, podcast. What am I talking about? Podcast.